Math 3, warm-up for May 4th. Number 1, determine which function has the greater y-intercept. Show work to support your answer. So a y-intercept would mean that you're looking for the point on the y-axis. So basically on the graph on the left, this spot right here, that would be my y-intercept. So just by looking at the graph, that is 0, 4 for the y-intercept. Looking at g of x, again, if we're on the y-axis, our x value has to be 0. So just plug in 0 for x and then simplify. So 2/3 times 3 to the 0. And then we get 2/3 times anything to the 0 power is 1. So then 2/3 times 1 is 2/3. So then as far as which function has a greater y-intercept, 4 is larger than 2/3. So f of x would be our answer. So I'm going to say f of x has a greater y-intercept because 4 is greater than 2/3. And I also circle my answer to make it super obvious that that's the answer. Oh, and by the way, these warm-ups, a lot of them have spiral questions. Well, the first 3 are spiral questions that you're going to see on our next summative, which will be the last one of the semester before mastery exams. On number 2, it says to solve. So everything's already on one side equal to 0. So probably the easiest thing to do is to try to factor. So whenever we're factoring, we want to divide out a greatest common factor if one exists. So all of those terms have a 5 that we could divide out, and all of the terms have at least an x. So we have a GCF of 5x. So let's divide out the 5x first, and then we get our leftovers in the back. Looking at our leftovers, we have 3 terms. There's an invisible 1 in front of the x squared, so this is a basic trinomial. So you're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to the c value in the back, which is -2, and then those same 2 numbers need to add up to the b value in the middle, which would be +1. So 1 times 2, but I'm trying to multiply to a -2, so one of my numbers needs to be negative. I'm going to make the smaller number negative because I'm trying to add up to a positive number. So -1 plus 2 is +1. So those are the 2 numbers that work so that we can factor. So we're going to have x minus 1 and x plus 2 equals 0. From here, since it's completely factored, we want to set each factor equal to 0 and then solve for x. The 5x in the front, that counts as a factor, so please make sure you don't forget about that one. So that first one, I'm undoing multiplication by doing division. The second equation, I want to add 1 to both sides, and then that last equation, I want to subtract 2 from both sides. So then I'm getting x equals 0, x equals 1, and x equals -2. So there are my answers. Looking at number 3, we have a square root. So anytime you're trying to solve a radical equation, you need to get the square root all by itself first. So on number 3, it already is all by itself. So I'm going to square both sides of the equation because that's the only way to undo a square root is to square it. So then I'm going to get 34 minus x squared equals 25. And then let's just try to get that x squared term all by itself because this problem only has an x squared. It does not also have an x term. So I'm going to subtract 34 from both sides of the equation. And 25 minus 34 is going to be -9. So I'm going to get -x squared equals -9. In order to get rid of that negative sign in the front, I want to divide by -1 on both sides of the equation. So then I'm left with x squared equals 9. In order to get rid of something squared, I need to square root. So whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. Whenever I introduce a square root into a problem while solving, I have to add a plus minus symbol. So x equals plus or minus 3. And then that would be it. Oh, I guess technically I should probably check because this is a radical equation. So I should double check and make sure that my answers work before I assume that they both work. So as far as checking goes, I'm going to take my answer. I'll do the positive answer first. So 34 minus 3 squared equals 5. And then I have to check and make sure that that actually works. So 34 minus 9 equals 5. And then 34 minus 9 is 25. So square root of 25 is indeed 5. So that first answer works. Let me try the other answer. So let me try negative 3. So square root 34 minus negative 3 squared equals 5. And then this should work because when I square negative 3, it turns into positive 9 again. So yeah, then it turns back into the exact same thing we had before. So yes, both answers do work. All right, now these last two are going to be on the formative that you're about to take, formative number 3. So this is the new material. So if I have 8 pi radians and I want to change it into degrees, I start with the 8 pi, and then I want it to end in degrees. So with these conversions, you're always multiplying by either 180 over pi or by pi over 180. Whatever you want your answer to be in, whatever units you want your answer to be in, those are the units that should be in the top of the fraction that you're multiplying by. So since I want my answer to be in degrees, I want the degrees in the top of my fraction. And then if you multiply across the top, 8 times 180 is 1,440. And there's also a pi. In the denominators, 1 times pi is pi. The pi's are going to cancel out, so you're left with 1,440 degrees. And then this last one, number 5, we're going from degrees into radians. So since we want our answer to be in radians, we want to multiply by pi over 180 degrees. So if I multiply across the top, I get 165 pi. If I multiply across the bottom, I get 180. So 165 divided by 180 reduces down to 11/12. And then there's still that pi symbol that we need to remember to bring over. And then our answer's in radians, so let's write down our units of radians, just to remind ourselves that that's our answer. And that is all. So now you're ready to go ahead and take formative 3. And again, all of these questions are on this last summative of the semester, or problems similar to them are on the summative